My name is Elena. Today we'll be talking about textual variance. A textual variance arises when a copyist makes deliberate or inadvertent alterations to the text that is being reproduced. Today we'll be discussing these points. 1. How many textual variances are there? 2. What kinds of quality and what kind of textual variances are there? 3. What theological beliefs depend on textually subject passages? 4. What do we have now versus what they wrote then? How many textual variances are there?
There are an estimated 200,000 textual variants. These are not actual errors, but variant readings, the vast majority of which are strictly grammatical. Second, these readings are spread throughout more than 5,300 manuscripts, so that a variant spelling of one letter of one word in one verse in 2,000 manuscripts is counted as 2,000 errors. It may be said that there are 200,000 scribal errors in the manuscript, but it is wholly misleading and untrue to say that there are 200,000 errors in the error text of the New Testament. This large number is gained by counting all of the variations in all of the manuscripts, around 4,500. This means that if, for example, one word is misspelled in 4,000 different manuscripts, it amounts to 4,000 errors. A textual variance is simply any difference from a standard text that involves spelling, word order, omission, addition, substitution, or a total rewrite of the text.
What is the quality and what kinds of textual variants are there?
The kinds of textual variants include spelling, word order, omissions, trivial variants, substantial variants, and viable and meaningful textual variants. Starting off first with spelling variants, the majority of textual variants in spelling. Example, the most common spelling variance is called the movable nu, which is when "and" is used. When the following word starts with a vowel, this does or can cause differences in the meaning. Similar to the spelling omission, another kind of textual variance is omission. Similar to spelling, this means that lines can be skipped in Scripture because the ending of the lines are similar. When then can cause differences in the meanings. Sometimes this then can also mean that words, syllables, or letters that should be written twice was written once, or what should be written once was written twice. Sometimes words were substituted that sound like the word that was said, but sometimes it just was similar sounding words. Sometimes words will be two joined together or separated, which changes the meaning of this and the spelling. Both omission and spelling variance differences can cause differences in the meaning of the text. These include the trivial variance. Example of this is in Matthew 1:18. The trivial variance isn't something that upsets the active parts of Scripture you can't change. The meaning of the order of the words in Scripture. Another example of this is found in Luke 6:4-10, and will be shown by looking at different versions of the Bible. Another quality variance is substantial variance, which is that the fact that there is no consequence to the text and do not have relationship on the text. Substantial variants do have an effect on the differences in the text. Example of this can be found in Mark 16:9-20, meaning some versions end at verse 9 and some versions end at verse 20. These two things can be examples of texts that show to be meaningful and viable, which can impact the understanding of what the author has written and can change what the original text says. That being said, the textual variants that are meaningful or possibly viable, they are exactly 1/4% of textual variants that's seen as meaningful and viable. What it means for the Scriptures is to be what it means for Scripture to be meaningful and viable. If a variance is viable, it means that it has only a good possibility of being a part of the original wording. Then a variant is only meaningful if it only changes the meaning of the if only it changes the meaning of the text. If the text is neither viable or meaningful, that means it is included in the spelling textual variance. The text that is viable over meaningful means that if it could be a part of the original text by making no meaningful changes of the text. For example, in the Greek language, the spelling for John is questioned, but whatever the spelling isn't meaningful, so the change doesn't change the meaning. When text is meaningful but not viable, the variants do change the meaning of the text, but they can't be the original text. Example of this is from Luke 6:22, where the manuscript from the 11th century Codex 2882 doesn't include the phrase, "on account of the Son of Man." Today's manuscripts does say this, meaning that Jesus is offering the blessing to who are hated and mistreated specifically because of their allegiance to Christ. But in the 11th century manuscript, the text is saying Jesus is offering the blessing to everyone in general who is hated and mistreated. This isn't viable because it occurs in the 11th century manuscript. Another example is of viable and meaningful, which is the smallest but most significant variance. This changes the meaning of the text. Example in 1 John 1:4 that it should say, "And we are written these things so that your joy may be complete," or should it say, "We are written these things so that our joy may be complete." The words "are" and "your" are different in these. So the meaning of 1 John 1:4 is altered depending on which is used in the versions of the Bible. Variants are small but can be called to our concern. No major doctrine can depend on these variances. It's not the number that are important, it's the nature of the variants. Most are trivial, affecting nothing in Scripture. But overall, the New Testament has admiring communication of the history that is given to us in context as Christians that we have the words the apostles wrote.
What theological beliefs depend on textually subject passages?
Okay, I'm going to be talking about an argument from Bart Ehrman. In Ehrman's book, Misquoting Jesus, Ehrman makes several arguments, one of which is that scribes not only changed the text accidentally, but also changed it intentionally for theological purposes. I'm going to be repeating some of the arguments against Ehrman's claims from Michael J. Kruger from the Reformed Theological Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina. There are a total of 3 arguments that Ehrman makes. The first being the unreliability of the scribes of the early Christianity and their abilities to make copies, and the second being that the manuscripts themselves are filled with inaccuracies, inconsistencies, and mistakes. To address the first problem, it would be a meaningless argument to claim that early Christians are unqualified to accurately copy the scriptures, because if that were true, then how could any history at all be accurate? Additionally, according to Kruger, Ehrman would have to prove that Christian copying would have to be the worst in order for his argument to even qualify as valid. Secondly, Ehrman's argument of inaccuracies, Kruger makes a point that, quote, "the vast majority of these textual differences are typical run-of-the-mill scribal variations that do not affect the integrity of the text in the least, misspellings, word order changes, omitted words, etc., end quote. Thus saying that even if this is true, it barely matters because the problems are so small. Secondly, the number of variants is tiny compared to the number of manuscripts we have, thus making his argument even smaller comparatively. And finally, Kruger points out that Ehrman fails to mention how easily spotted these and corrected these textual variants are, thus making his argument irrelevant. The last argument is that scribes not only accidentally changed the text, but also intentionally changed the text for the purpose of theology. According to Michael J. Kruger, quote, "intentional theological changes make up very, very few of the textual variants in the New Testament, and therefore, on a relative scale, have little significance for determining the overall state of the text." Basically, what he's saying is that there aren't enough theological textual variations to make this a major problem. Kruger continues to say that, quote, "if indeed the number of textual variants is as high as he claims, 400,000, then theologically motivated changes make up such a slight portion of this amount that one wonders why they aren't being discussed in the first place." Kruger also explains further that Ehrman is overdramatic about the theological variants, and it is impossible to know the motive behind any scribe who could have written anything down. Basically, this means that this argument is based on a huge assumption of something that can't even be accurately proven without talking to a scribe directly. Accurate motivation cannot be discovered. And let's not forget that Ehrman himself said that essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. That statement alone destroys Ehrman's arguments for his third argument, as it is obvious that he doesn't even stand for what he said.
What do we have now versus what they wrote then?
Okay, out of all the 5,000 extinct early manuscript versions of the Old Testament, not one predates the 4th century. The New Testament that exists today is essentially a product of the 4th century editors and writers. No significant changes in the last 1,000 years of making copies. As time goes on, we are getting closer and closer to the original text, not further and further away. No scripture originated as one's own explaining man wrote from God. We don't have a perfect paper trail back to the first copy.
We talked about 1, how many textual variances are there? 2, what is the quality and what kind of textual variances are there? 3, what theological beliefs depend on textually subject passages? And 4, what do we have now versus what they wrote there? I'm Elena Carpenter, and I approve this message.